Okay, this morning I'm going to start out with a short story, as we usually do. That's going to blend right into the scriptures this morning. A few years back, a retired pastor inherited his parents' farm. He decided to sell to a realty company who was going to develop the land. It was over 200 acres, so it sold for a sizable sum. He then put the money into a trust. He moved to a small town and attended the only church in the area, a very small assembly. The building was in need of many repairs, and funds were in short supply at this small assembly. However, it was located on a 5-acre plot. These issues, along with a long-winded pastor, began to take its toll. Sunday preaching was worldly in content. His constant complaints of no one sitting in the front pews, we don't have that problem. These things began to irritate this elderly pastor. One Sunday after the service, he met with a younger pastor, and he was let's just say he didn't cut him any slack. He asked him, he says, "Do you understand what your job is?" And the pastor sort of said, "Well, what do you mean?" He says, "Well, your job is to edify the body, not to cut them down, not to tear them down." He says, "And you're talking too long." He says, "You're long-winded and you enjoy listening to yourself speak." Well, the young pastor wasn't too happy to hear this, and he simply broke off the conversation and walked away. Over the next few months, nothing really changed, and one Sunday, it was announced that the elderly pastor had died. A few weeks later, the church received a notice from the pastor's attorney saying that he had set up this trust and had given it to the church. There were, however, a few conditions. The funds were to be used for the building of a new church, and the design of the church was to be followed according to the language in the trust. The elderly pastor had designed the new church, and the old church did not have to be demolished, as they had plenty of room to start on the new construction. The trust contained one last set of instructions. The elders were to be given the first tour, and the pastor would be given a second tour on his own. And obviously, he would not be privy to everything at that point in time. When the tour began, on the pastor's tour, he marveled at the construction. The nursery, the areas for children's church, cafeteria, kitchen, the basement was finished off. It was a beautiful building. They finally got to the sanctuary. The pastor looked in, and he gasped. He says, "Where are the pews?" And the gentleman said, "Well, there's a button on the back wall." He said, "There's 2 buttons, press the one on the left." So the pastor pressed the button, and through the floor in the back came up the first section of pews. And he said, "Press the button again." So he pressed the button again. Another section of pews came forward. And he looked at this. The pastor thought, "Boy, this is great." And the tour guide says, "We're going to fill these as the people come in. That way you'll have people in the front rows." So the pastor thought that this was fantastic. Okay, he couldn't have thought of anything better himself. So at that time, what happened is, I gotta skip a part here. So the giddy young pastor couldn't wait for Sunday as he prepared his long-winded message. When the Sunday arrived and the people filled the front pews, he was filled with pride, and he began his service again in the same fashion, long-winded. He felt like he was in total control. When his service hit the 45-minute mark, one of the elders in the back, and we'll call him Randy for today, he got up and pushed the second button. And slowly, the pulpit and the pastor sunk into the basement. So basically, the elderly pastor had designed and paid for the building to save the church. Jesus Christ designed the plan of salvation and paid for our sins to save us. We have to believe in the finished work of the cross, like the young pastor should have believed in the finished work of the church building. He got one thing he wanted, he got something else maybe he didn't plan on.